You're listening to the Yin and Yang Show, a marketing and sales conversation with Lindsay Kelly and Brian Signorelli. Strategic and tactical advice about inbound sales and marketing.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Yin and Yang Show. Thanks for joining us this week. We love having you guys join us. We appreciate it so much. I am Lindsay Kelly. He joined, as always, by Mr. Brian Signorelli, and a new dear friend of mine and a longer friend of Mr. Signorelli, Derek, and I'm going to butcher your last name,
Wyszynski.
Wyszynski.
It's actually pronounced Smith.
There we go.
No, it's Wyszynski. Yes.
Thank
Wyszynski,
you.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I will let Brian do that introduction then for Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have Derek on with us this morning. It's super bright and early for you, 8 o'clock. Assuming you're on the West Coast this morning, Derek. Is that right?
Yes. West Coast every morning.
Yeah,
He's
every
in
morning.
Benihana's, he
On
said.
the West Coast.
Yeah, I'm in the basement of the Benihana's here in Seattle, Washington, as you can see. So
giving real sales advice every day and by night managing Benihana's.
That's right. That's right. That's holding court.
Yeah.
for those who can't see him, he's got a beautiful Oriental screen behind him. So it's a lovely of Benihana's to provide that for you.
Fantastic. It's great.
It looks good. I feel very calmed by your presence this morning.
Yes. What you can't see are the 3 samurai swords on the wall, but other than that,
You should grab one.
Exactly. Because I'm a 16-year-old kid in 1987. That's why my bedroom looks like that.
So I want to give just a little bit of background on how I met Derek. Derek and I have actually never met in person, but I guess that's mattering less and less these days, despite the fact that I enjoy meeting in person. Derek wrote a post that I found on LinkedIn I believe it was called John Henry, the Salesperson. Yeah. And it just wrapped my attention. And I loved it. I reached out to him. In fact, I loved it so much. And I thought that as I kind of followed you, Derek, that as I was finishing up my book that I've been working on for the past, probably two years or so, I reached out to Derek and said, hey, the last chapter of my book sucks. You're really articulate with talking about kind of the future of sales and the evolution. And I know this is kind of a moonshot, but any chance you'd be interested in guest writing the last chapter? And you said, what did you say? It was something about like, 5,000 words is kind of like a Starbucks drive-through order for me.
That's how I order my macchiato, 5,000 words. So let's,
words at a time. Yeah. So I guess let me shut up, and I'd love for you to introduce yourself a little bit. Tell everyone that's listening with us. We're watching the video today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing now.
Okay, great. Yeah, my name is Derek Wyszynski. I am quote unquote a sales leader, whatever that means. I've been in business for the past odd years, and actually, most recently, I was the vice president of sales, chief sales hacker for a company called Zinbit, which is still a fantastic Salesforce-based application that allows you to do a lot of great things in your email through Salesforce. And recently, I've been advising a couple of companies. Sales Tribe in Australia is one of them, where they're kind of revolutionizing the way salespeople can interact with the sales ecosystem that we find ourselves in. And really, my path to sales is when I was in high school, I sold magazine subscriptions, telemarketing after school over the phone. So I've often said that if you could sell a subscription to Time magazine to an auto worker who you just disrupted from their meatloaf and mashed potatoes, you can pretty much sell anything. And then from that point, I served in the United States Army, used a lot of technology there because I was detached to the National Security Agency as a cryptologist. So I used a lot of computers and did a lot of networking on the fly. So when I came out, I naturally kind of didn't go into sales. I went into networking and IT, and I found myself over the course of a decade becoming an IT leader, eventually being a CIO for one of the largest law firms in the United States. And what that taught me is that, I really want to get back into sales, because for 10 years I've been dealing with IT vendors, and these guys don't know how to sell to me. I know how to sell to me. So I'm going to stop making the chump change, and I'm going to go and do this enterprise IT sales. So that's what I've been doing. That's what I've been doing basically since the turn of the century.
Thanks for sharing that. One of the things that really stood out to me when I think you and I were kind of talking about, what's the kind of bent for the last chapter of the book. You had mentioned that you had spent some time working in the NSA, and my mind kind of was immediately blown. I'm like, okay, I definitely randomly rolled the dice and picked the right person, because Derek is kind of like, next generation smart, off the charts, and you've never failed to disappoint, obviously, along the way. Not to stroke your ego too much, but one thing I was thinking about, as you're talking about this, you've lived through some really interesting periods in time, right? I mean, to kind of observe multiple decades of sales and the progression, both being on the seller side and the buyer side. But before I get into that, one thing I'm kind of curious, I think, people listening would be curious to hear a little bit more about too, is, you've established, in my opinion, quite a presence on LinkedIn. I sometimes think, I'm like, how does he have time to comment on so much and to share so much and write so much? I know a lot of the writing probably comes very easy to you, and you've observed it so long that, it's just kind of like, I know exactly what I want to say, and it is very fluid. But talk to us a little bit about, how you decided to dedicate the amount of time you do, or build a presence, on LinkedIn, and why it matters.
Well, here's for instance, the first part is at the tail end of my career in Xerox. This was before the big breakup, before the big split, and I was dealing with an organization that had a very I wouldn't say old or antiquated, but I would say mature sales process, mature sales methodology. And I was trying to infuse some new stuff into it. So that's when I started. My very first post was to sales managers, because I was a sales director for the for healthcare, selling to Xerox healthcare customers for the United States, for North America, and I ran teams in multiple cities. And the post I did was, as a sales leader, does your experience matter anymore? And because what I was finding, and this is the aha moment that kind of pushed me into getting involved in sales enablement and sales methodology. Because before then, quite honestly, I was always a top performer. So I kept my IP to myself, because in sales, if I create a great deck, I'm not going to share it with anybody, because I'm an individual contributor and I want to deal with my commission and my bonus and my everything else like that.
Marketing people hated you.
Well, exactly. Well, listen, believe you me, so did everybody else in the organization, except my sales leaders, because even though I strutted around like the cock of the walk, I had the numbers to back it up. So that being said, but by about 2014, 2015, I'd been in 15 years now in professional B2B sales after a career in IT, and I realized that the stuff I learned in the 90s, in the early 2000s, even in the 80s when I was doing telemarketing and that type of stuff, it doesn't compute anymore. Not only doesn't compute on a tactical level, it doesn't compute on a strategic level, because the customer is different. And the fact is I wrote the post that said, does your experience, selling in the Clinton administration, enterprise software or storage devices or monitors or whatever you were selling in 1993, and does that experience equate to someone selling SaaS in 2015? And does, to a completely different customer, a completely different environment. And quite honestly, when I asked myself that question, the answer was no. The answer was no. My experience doing all of that back in the day, as I called it, wasn't valuable now. And it wasn't. That was for me personally. So I asked the question. And it was the right question to ask, because that was the very first post I let out. There was a lot of feedback. So I slowly built, post upon post, a little bit of a small following, but a vocal following and a loyal following within that. And then after moving on, from Xerox, where my ICP, my ideal customer profile, was IT and facilities and that type of thing, I came on board to Zenbit as the VP of Sales and the Chief Sales Hacker, where their ICP was sales leaders and Salesforce administrators. So I was naturally able to take that stuff that I was doing anyways, but weaponize it to my ICP, which was incredibly important. And so then after 2 years of doing that, again, my following went up, not as much as, a lot of people's, but I get, as you see from your personal experience with me and how you reached out to me and how we've interacted, I've got a very loyal and a very, a solid following. And the people, I'm dealing with people I've known, like Graham Hawkins, for when I wrote the foreword to his book about a year or so ago.
Yep.
I've known him for 3 years. We talk every week, and I've never physically seen him. Mm-hmm. And in like flesh, human flesh. But the fact is that this new, so taking that sense of like you and I on the West Coast, and we've created this relationship. You've trusted me enough. You've got to know me enough where you invited me to share in your upcoming book coming out in April. You can pre-order now on Amazon.
And they'll cross-sell you Graham's book that you wrote the forward for.
Exactly.
Right. So, it'll come up as a suggestion in
exactly.
in Amazon's little suggestion thing.
So with that type of relationship that I'm able to build with you and you're able to build with me this way, what does the historical way people are trained to sell B2B, what value does that offer? You didn't call me on the phone 16 times. You didn't send me a whole bunch of dead marketing emails trying to get me to click on them and stuff like that. You didn't knock on my door. You didn't even know where my door is. The fact of the matter is that we created. Everyone talks about wanting to create a relationship with the customer, but the fact of the matter is the way relationships are created now are different, and the pushback on social, the pushback on what we're doing here is because it's uncomfortable. And that's kind of culminated into the post you talked about, the John Henry post. And the John Henry post, I took the historical story of John Henry, the guy out there who's the logger and who's cutting down the trees and doing all that stuff, and he's the greatest guy ever in the history of everything. And the guy with the machine comes, and in the story, John Henry beats the machine, and ends up expiring. But he beat him. And that was like the moral of the story, that he ended up winning. And in my version of that, it's John Henry's the salesperson, and he's doing the cold calling and the prospecting and everything else like that. And he beats the machine. He beats the AI. He beats it. And his reward is to get fired, because even though he beat it. John Henry makes $150,000 a year. The cost of, he also makes $50,000 in commission. His on-target earnings with benefits is $225,000. That AI software, which can go ahead and do basically 50% of what he does, costs $100,000, and it's capable of being run by 18 or 19 or 20. It can do the work of 20 reps. Mm-hmm. So the cost of customer acquisition with this single John Henry is so high that organizations and people are willing to invest in this technology and different models, like hiring, low-cost SDRs on the front end to do the prospecting and everything else like that, in order to go ahead and maximize their investment. So the fact is that that it kind of culminates with the fact that I believe the day of hiring great salespeople and leaving them alone, if that's the way you've managed, if that's the way you've done it, that's no longer the case. And if you can't create a repeatable process infused with technology that can go ahead and give you revenue you can count on, because that's what your shareholders, that's what your investors are looking on. They're not looking at this quarter, they're looking at 3 quarters from now, what your revenue projections are going to be. And if you can't create a model for that, you're just not ready for prime time.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of the long, that's kind of the long and short of it, if that makes any sense.
It
Well,
does. No, I mean, no, go ahead, Lindsay.
yeah, I was gonna say, like, it sounds to me like you kind of fell into this LinkedIn influencer type of a role when you were still back in corporate America.
Yeah.
I guess this is going to be statements / questions. Was your goal in doing that to just share your knowledge, or were you thinking to yourself, I got to get out of here, I got to find a way to do this, and if I position myself as an expert, I can go on and now become what you are today? And so that's part one.
Okay.
Go ahead.
That's a great question. Number one, no, it was a way to vent. It was a way to,
it was a vent, yeah.
Quite honestly, I didn't, I didn't set out to be, some type of thought leader or somebody that's like, hey, let's listen to this guy. Because, and again, I'm not trying to slap the food out of anybody's mouth as far as when it comes to that, but there's a lot of discount Tony Robbins out there. There's a lot of people that do that kind of stuff, and I'm not interested in that. I'm a professional B2B salesperson. You got a widget. I want to figure out a way to sell it. That's what I'm interested in. So by speaking that way and writing that way and talking that way, I think what happened is naturally people said, well, listen, this guy sells copiers. This guy sells software. This guy's not trying to sell me sales training. This guy's not trying to sell me his thing. So I kind of want to listen to him. What's his feedback? Plus he's funny and he's weird and he does a lot of memes and he does videos and he does.
Those are all true things, by the way. I will social
stuff
proof
like
you
that.
right now.
Yeah, he does a lot of weird, wacky things, and so really it was a way to vent, but was also a way for social became LinkedIn, Twitter, the articles, the videos, the cartoons. It was a creative outlet because I think that a lot of salespeople out there, a lot of people out there have this pent-in creativity, and we live in a time in 2018 where there are so many avenues for you to express creativity. And I was just really, lucky enough to stumble onto one. And it was because, quite honestly, because it was eventing, because the traction, I was saying the same things in corporate boardrooms and meeting rooms with area and direct VPs that I was in my LinkedIn articles. I was just getting more people listening on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
no,
Right.
that's a good point. Well, and I guess part two of this question is, you've already risen to a place in the social sphere where you have a voice amongst a lot of other noise.
Right.
So, and it's been quite a few years since you started doing that. And today, 2018, it's even more competitive to make that leap and be that voice.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in sales today, and I saw your quote that said like something like 50% of sales reps did not meet quota in 2017. That is terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
That is terrifying if you're in sales. Thank God I'm in marketing. Sorry, guys. But what do you do as a sales rep today? Especially if you are a little more seasoned and you have been utilizing those processes that you were saying from the 90s and early 2000s prior to all of this being such a big thing in the sales world.
You got to add more value, right, Derek?
Well, yeah, I think you definitely have to add, what we talk about
How much
is
more value
adding
can
value.
these people add?
Well, see,
I mean, come on, man.
The thing is there's a difference between.
I'm just trying to rile him up. I'm trying to poke the bear. I'm sorry.
There's, listen, the intrinsically, as and this comes down to sales philosophy, I guess, or basically life philosophy, maybe. And I was just having this, another shout. I was having this conversation over LinkedIn Messenger with Noah Goldman just this morning,
Mm-hmm.
where I said, there's, somebody posted a video, and I was looking at it. I said, intrinsically, the customer doesn't care about the value that the sales person provides, because they're looking at it as a transactional. You have a widget, I have a problem, we need to fix it, and we need to figure out a way that we can get this done. And a lot of the differentiation out there is a lot of people are coming on saying, well, you got to provide value. You got to be a trusted advisor. You got to do all these other things. And my issue with that is that, well, why not just try to be the best person selling your widget? I mean, so here's the point. If I sell, and let's say I sell SaaS software, and my ICP is IT directors. That should be who I'm communicating with in social. Those should be the people I connect to. I should jettison all those sales nerds that I connect to. Though I should be writing content based upon my ICP, because that's where I want to go ahead and provide influence. Because if I'm a salesperson selling SaaS to IT directors, but I'm on LinkedIn writing a lot about sales stuff and sales things and sales process, sure, I'm getting a lot of followers, but I'm also counting change in the car before I go to lunch at Burger King, because I'm not making my number. And so for me, a lot of sales, we could talk about this. A lot of sales is about luck too, being in the right place at the right time. Nobody will ever tell you that in a sales training class. But the fact is, I kind of lucked out that what I was doing and Zinbit's ICP kind of melded together, and it provided me this capability to go ahead and have this conversation. But my advice to if you're an old sales dog, if you're a new sales pup or something else, whatever market you're in, whatever you're selling, become I hate the phrase, thought expert in that. Go ahead and don't connect to me. Don't connect to other salespeople. Connect to your customers. Connect to your customers' friends and people. Because if you connect to an IT director, more often than not, all of their connections are other IT people, right? So it's like you need to have a conversation in that space. Leave sales blah blah to the people that sell sales blah blah stuff. If you want to concentrate on becoming that type of thought leader, do it in the space. It's kind of I talk about the old ways and learning stuff in the 90s. And I once had a sales manager, and even though he said it years and years and years ago, it's that the story still resonates. I was sitting in some little type of boiler room. We're making phone calls, and two of my coworkers are sitting there. They're talking about football. And the VP of sales comes by and says, hey, you guys like talking about football? Oh, yeah, we like talking about football. Me, I'm on the phone. I'm calling people. And he turns to him and says, hey, listen, why don't you pick up the phone and talk to somebody about football that may buy a copier from you? And what he was saying was it was so basic. It was so basic and so old school, but it still resonates now. If I'm going to write a post, if I'm going to invest the time and effort to do a cartoon or to do a video or something else like that, I should direct it to somebody who may be willing to buy or talk about my widget or whatever it is I'm doing. And the fact is that you do that a couple of times. Let's say you sell SaaS for a couple of years, then you sell something another couple of years, and you sell something. You build this network where you are then valuable to a multitude. Because quite honestly, most salespeople aren't going to be founders of companies. They're not going to, most salespeople are workaday people that are trying to go ahead and bring in money to pay the mortgage, to pay for the kids' braces, to do all those things that we do. So rather than get the Wolf of Wall Street fist bumps and stuff like that, because you're talking about closing and Glengarry and everything else, go ahead and just, whoever your ICP is, construct valuable insight and communicate to them, connect with them. And then I'd rather have 5,000 followers that could buy something from me than 125,000 followers that just connect with me because they think my cartoons are funny.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And that's why, people sometimes look at the methodology of getting that buyer persona. We call it a buyer persona.
Right.
Some of the questions that we ask them, we get to the part where we ask, what's your hobby? How many kids do you have? How old are they? And these are all things that give away what they're going through with in their lives right now. Like your office manager who is in her 50s, she's going through college applications with her daughter.
Right.
Like how can you relate that to what you're trying to sell? How can you start that conversation? And people buy from folks that they know, like, and trust, you know?
Well, and the thing is, and Brian, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but you know, I really think that the biggest problem with sales today is that we sell the way we don't buy. I know that's new.
I've never.
You may
Wow.
you may not have
I
heard
think
that before.
every interview we've done so far this year, somebody has said that.
Well, the thing is that when you think of it, and what you're talking about is specific, it's the human connection, it's understanding, but the most valuable thing we can bring to any user persona, because I'm a huge a believer of identifying your ICP and then identifying multiple personas. And this is the reason why, is because there are customers, and there are customers of your customers that you influence in now what we call the complex group sale. So let's take, for instance, I'm selling SaaS and I'm selling it. The IT manager is the decision maker, or the influencer to the decision maker, who's the C-level. But the users, the end users, the people that use the software are my users, and they're influencers in that. So the fact of the matter is, my job as a modern 2018 salesperson is not so much to say my software affects the IT director this way, and then it affects the end user this way. Because what I'm doing is I'm like I shouldn't be like the center of a wheel with these different spokes. I should be more like a web. I should be connecting the IT director with the end users and making their interaction much more valuable for each other. Because if I can do that, I'm not only taking care of my customer, I'm taking care of the customers of my customer. And that's what's lost in a lot of what, the complex sale is. But it all starts with all that, creating all that ICP and the personas underneath it, is identifying the fact that how you buy things in B2C, in your own personal life, influences your purchase decisions in B2B. And there's a lot of people out there that will tell you, well, B2C is different. Shopping on Amazon is different. Buying a car is different. Buying a house is different. And I'm mentioning all of those things because all of those things have either removed or are removing the salesperson from that process. And they're the two largest purchases people make in their life. And I'm talking normal people, not some guy owning a casino, multi-billion-dollar guy. I'm talking about normal people. They buy a house and they buy a car. And those are the two most stressful, most expensive purchases they make. And if they're willing to jettison the human that they have used for the last X number of thousands of years in order to go ahead and do that, and do it in an automated way where they're empowered, where they're able to run the process, where they are able to compare and not feel pressure. If they're willing to do that with the most important purchases they make in their life, who am I to say, what hubris do I have as a salesperson to say, well, when you move from your home to your cubicle in Widget Incorporated, you're going to buy differently. You're going to want to buy the way I'm selling.
That's something I think you may have been the one that clued me into this. And if not, I can't remember where it came from. And I'm not even going to try to fact check it because I just don't know at this point. I've said it so many times, but somebody along the way told me, if you want to see where B2B sales is going, or just B2B business is going, period, all you have to do is look at how B2C operates.
Yeah.
Because the reality is B2C companies don't have the luxury of solving problems with human beings. They actually have to solve their problem with technologies, where in B2B, especially in the complex B2B sale, what's the way that as a sales leader you ramp up your growth? Usually through headcount. Mm-hmm. That's usually what you do, right?
Hire more salespeople.
Exactly. And they say, well, we're just going to keep adding and adding and adding. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? In B2C, you need more elegant solutions, because that's not a reality, because the average sales price of your product might be $1. I mean, think about any app you download, right? Maybe like it's either free or it's $1, right? Or you're making money through advertising or something.
Right,
so
exactly.
These app experiences, or experiences through Amazon, or experiences through TrueCar or through Redfin, etc. They're so beautiful and they're so elegant and they're so easy because they have to be. They're I mean, it's literally the perfect use case of, I'm going to butcher this, but it's basically what necessity is the mother of innovation or invention, right? I mean, that's the reality, is that, if you want to see that, and this kind of gets into something you touched on earlier, Derek, is that you start looking at the cost of, why did John Henry ultimately not get the job at the end of the day? Well, it's because John Henry's expensive.
Yeah. And
my opinion on that in the future, I'd love to hear your opinion on this too, is that privately, I think any CEO, and probably publicly, some of them would admit this too, but I'd be willing to bet that any CEO behind closed doors would say, yeah, you know what, like you can find a way to reduce my sales and marketing
Ah,
expense.
yeah.
I'd love that because it represents a huge chunk. Why do you think so many SaaS businesses, for example, are running on razor thin margins? Yet, despite the fact that they're doing 80% profit margin before they have their sales and marketing expense.
Well,
And let me tell you, it's not the marketing expense; it's a
yeah.
sales expense that's driving that.
You're so right on. It's like well, if you look at, look at what happened last year to a company. I won't mention the name, but it rhymes with schmorical. So a company came out and they laid off thousands of salespeople. And I was getting LinkedIn, because a lot of people from that organization are linked with me. They follow me, and I would see these posts from these people said, hey, I just got laid off, and I've been a quota performer for 5 years. I've been the President's Club 4 out of the last 7 years. I am 182% of my 2016 quota, and it's only November or October, whenever it happened. And these people got laid off. And I wrote a post about it, and basically what I said was that your personal performance as a salesperson is no longer the arbiter of whether or not you stay employed. There are forces in the market. There are decisions being made higher up. You could be at 200% quota for a product that you sell for your company at Widget Incorporated. But let me tell you this, if that profit margin, if that margin on that particular product is less than something else, your company will jettison that product. They'll sell it off, or they'll just kill it. They won't update it, and they'll just kill it, and they'll invest in something else, which is what that company did. They got rid of an entire product suite, or they cycled it out, and they invested in the cloud. Because that's where the margin is, because that's where the money is, because when someone is because as people have realized, if someone if someone invests in your cloud and they put something they're part of your business, that your day-to-day business is important because you're running it, but you trust that organization enough to run part of that, so you don't have to have on-premises servers and everything else like that. That's a link there. That's going wider and deeper, so you can invest and sell them more products, more services, more everything else. So of course they're going to invest in, well, why don't you just put all of your storage on our cloud? That way you don't got to invest in these storage area networks. That's why, why don't you do with our cloud-based database system as opposed to an on-prem solution? Because we know in a year after using the cloud, we'll be able to offer you so many more services because we're integral to your day-to-day. So as the salesperson who's sitting there in Utah or in Arizona, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, I've been at quota all this time. I'm doing my job. I'm making the calls. I'm doing everything. Why did I get the pink slip? The answer to that is that your quota performance it's no longer the only arbiter of whether you're keeping a job or not. And if you don't believe me, go do a Google search and find out all the salespeople that got laid off at companies that rhyme with Schmorical and Microsoft and all these others that they had large sales organizations that are gone now.
Yeah,
and,
I mean,
and neither one of them are hurting for cash.
Right.
Yeah. And we had Keenan on, and he was talking about how mergers cost him his VP role, where he was making massive amounts of money, and he had to start over.
Right, and no one asked him about the merger, because because that conversation happened at such a different level that. So that's the thing. So we're all in our own kind of pool. We're all in our own kind of fishbowl, right? We're all kind of the kings of our own and the queens of our own domain. And the fact is that we have to invest in ourselves and become important, not only within that fishbowl, but listen, if you're selling database solutions, cloud-based database solutions, you better become an expert in that market, because I tell you what, when you leave X company, you need to be able to jump over to Y. And those types of things. It used to be and Brian, I'm probably a little bit older than both of you, but I remember back in the day when jumping a job every 2 years was a bad thing on a resume. Now you know what they call that? They call that track to become a VP. Right, because people go and they work as an assistant store manager in Burger King in 2012, and then by 2018, they're
VP of meat packing for
they're vice president of lead generation for XML Elemental P. That's
How'd
like,
you know my title?
there you go, exactly. and so the thing is, you always so you guys asked the question at the beginning, is like, why do this? Why spend the time investing in your personal, I've got a regular 8 to 5 job or 7 to 7 job, and then why do you write the articles? Why do you take time during the day to comment on things and everything else while you're doing all this other stuff? And the reason is because it's time that's invested in my personal brand, and that's really where it comes all down to.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad we have a marketer here that can speak to this. But salespeople have been historically horrible on establishing a personal brand, and the reason is because they were always pushing the brand of the company.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So your brand as a salesperson now. Again, you need to be an expert in your market, and you need to be connected to your ICP and write stuff for them. But your brand should reflect your expertise in whatever market you're investing in. And there's another, I don't know if you've had him on, but Lee Bartlett, he wrote a book, the #1 bestseller. And in the first chapter, he talks about choosing a company when you go to sell. Like, don't just throw out a whole bunch of resumes and then just go with the first person that hires you. If you're going to choose a company, choose one in a market that you want to work in. Choose one with a technology that you think works, that type of thing, because at the end of the day, your brand is. There's a company right now out. It's experimenting. It's called Bravado, and I just spoke to the founder recently, and we had like a 2-hour Skype talk. And what he's doing is he's creating, in this world of reviews and 5-star reviews and reviews on Amazon and Yelp and Glassdoor and everything else, he's creating a review referral site for salespeople. For salespeeple themselves.
I'm so hyped up on this. I went right to the site as soon as you mentioned that, Derek. I asked for early access, emailed Halligan about it.
So what you do, the whole point of this is that your references, your referrals are, I've been at Xerox, I've been at Zinbit, I've been at other companies. I go out and reach out to my customers, all of which I'm still connected to on LinkedIn, by the way. I reach out to my customers and I say, hey, will you write me a review of what it was like to work with me when I was at Xerox, when I was at Viewpoint, when I was at Zinbit, when I was at these other places? And they write those reviews and they put that on the site, and they give you a rating on your value as a salesperson. So I'll return all the way back to the very beginning of the conversation about salesperson value. Your value is not determined by you. It's not determined by your boss. It's not determined by anything. You can't say, I'm going to be valuable today. Your value eventually is determined by the customers and the people that you interact with.
That's right.
And
Absolutely.
They are going to measure that. And what better measurement than having a Yelp for salespeople or a Glassdoor for salespeople, and you know what, quite honestly, here's a big secret that people don't know. Your customers are already looking you guys up.
Right.
When so all these things on LinkedIn, when you say, hey, look, I'm 117% of quota and I just closed this guy with an 87% margin, your next customer is going to read that post, right?
I always thought so. Larry Levine was the one that kind of keyed me out of this. I still have not updated to change my profile to reflect this, but I think you're absolutely right, because I'm thinking about what you're saying, and if I were in the buyer's shoes and I saw the rep that's like P Club, 190% of quota, close a deal, sales bro, all that. Mm-hmm. I'd say I really don't actually want to work with that person, because what they're really good at doing is convincing other people to part with their money. They're not necessarily really good at helping people. Like,
well, not only
figure out
that,
how-
I'd be like, hey, can I have the guy who's like at 20% quota? Because
Where'd you get that
honestly,
phone? What the,
oh, I have multiple
mini
phones.
phone?
Listen, yeah, exactly. I've got everything here. But it's like, so the thing
But
is,
you don't
is
have
like,
a phone with a cord?
You got a prop. It's like a tiny phone.
listen. I told you, I don't
It's a
let the
bad
young,
phone.
like I'll be 50 next year, so I'm old. So
That's
I
the
still
NSA
have.
phone.
Yeah, exactly.
Straight line.
That's a direct line to McMaster's. He's looking for a job, by the way. So he's.
You should be writing more on LinkedIn, for his ICP.
Exactly. I don't think his ICP reads LinkedIn. Oh, let's not get political here. Yeah. So.
Well, Derek, we got about 5 or 10 minutes left. I want to throw you a softball because I know you're passionate about this, and I love to hear you talk about it and write about it and think about it. If I could hear you think, which I think we'll get to in the future, but that's a segue into the question,
right?
Which is, I'd love to hear a little bit of your thoughts on what future exactly are we barreling towards. You can pick whatever horizon you want. Say, hey, it's 5 years, it's 10 years, or I don't know how many years, but eventually this is going to happen.
Yeah.
What is the future of sales? And I'd love to hear if you have comments on marketing too. I mean, this is a sales and marketing conversation. So any thoughts on what we're barreling into here?
Okay, good. Yeah, I won't put a time frame on that because I'm not Nostradamus. Because really, quite honestly, if you would have told me 10 years ago, my entire life would be based upon my smartphone, and everything I do is on this little device, and it's how I connect to customers, I would have said, you're crazy. That's never going to happen. So as far as the time frame of prognostication, but I will tell you eventually what I think it is. And I was speaking to Mike Miller, who's a guy in Vegas who's really great as far as a sales thought leader and that type of thing. And I was telling him, I said, I think we're on the descent, and this may be controversial. I think we're on the descent of B2B sales, as far as human beings managing a process for business customers to buy things. Now, the descent may be long. I told him, I said, it's not like a rock dropping. It's more like a plane landing. And it's a long descent. Maybe we're flying into San Francisco where we got to turn around and do a left turn and everything else. But the fact is we're descending. And it's our choice as salespeople, as sales leaders, to manage that descent. If I ever wrote a sales book, I would call it Managing the Descent. Because I think is that to manage the descent, we can go one of two ways. We can land smoothly, or we can crash into a mountain. And so this is our point. So this is where we're going. And again, like you said earlier, I draw my references to in B2C. I don't miss having to go to Blockbuster and to put on pants to go rent a movie. I don't miss that. I don't miss going to a photo mat to get for very old people, but they used to be in parking lots. You have to drive up, put your photos in. There's a thing called film. It came in cameras. So nobody misses that. In about 5 years, nobody's going to miss going to a car dealership to buy a car. In about 6 or 7 years, nobody's going to, because when Redfin and Zillow and that get really smart and they actually start selling houses, nobody's going to miss going to a local realtor in order to do that. Listen, Amazon started last year with their local driverless store. Now they're popping up all over this area. They're going to be in your town incredibly soon, where you're going to walk in. So this is the way things are going. And the fact of the matter is, I think it's hubris for us to believe that in 15 years, someone buying a business solution is going to pick up a phone or read an email or even read a blog post or interact with a piece of marketing or something else like that to go ahead and talk to a person to buy something. Because and I wrote a recent post about this. It is not the sales process that's going to determine this. It is going to be the evolution of the products and services that we sell. The reason I started selling software in the enterprise sales days, where you had to invest in time with sales reps, maybe have an RFP process, have a bunch of people come in, as sales engineers, we'd have this whole long process because the investment, the upfront investment was so much. You had to buy all the software, you had to install it, you had to pay a yearly licensing or or some type of fee to deal with the support fee to deal with that. If you made a wrong decision, you were stuck with that software for 10 years. There's there's ERP systems out there that they hire implementers and they're working at a company for 10 years because it takes 10 years to implement the old enterprise ERP, right? SaaS, the product suite changed, technology changed, and so the sales process changed. We are trying, right now, I see a lot of organizations trying to infuse an old enterprise sales based, on-prem software delivery structure to SaaS. The customer wants to go somewhere, they want to look up information, they want to test. We need to communicate with them that way. You talked about what marketing. I think every salesperson needs to be a smarketer. I think every marketer needs to be a smarketer, because in the old days, marketers were speaking one to many and salespeople spoke one to one. Now both of them, because of the way the process is, they're speaking one to few. Because marketers, they kind of tunnel, they want to cast into certain market segments. So they want to, they don't want to talk like this. Coca-Cola doesn't want to talk to everybody, have a Coke and a smile. They zero in. They zero in on different market segments, and they want Coca-Cola to be the choice of 18 to 25-year-old guys with red hair, right? So they market to that. And so they speak one to few. And salespeople, when I walk into a business or I'm talking to a couple of people right here, I have not only my customer, but my customers of my customers, influencers, everything else. I'm speaking one to few. So if we're used to speaking one to many, these big ways, and we're used to speaking one to one, we have to figure out a way to have a conversation where it's one to a few. And there's no better place to do that, wrapping it back around, than experimenting in social.
Yep.
Because what you're doing is I don't have 25 million followers, so I'm not speaking one to many. But when I do a post and I have 15 people respond, I take that in and I figure out a way to communicate. So if you look at the way I've written and my content from 2014 to 2018, there's been an evolution. And the evolution of it has been because I take my audience into consideration. And I know by doing old school A and B testing, this one worked, this one didn't, I'm going to write more like the one that worked and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, you asked, what is sales going to look like? I think at the end, sales is going to be sales is not going to be a noun. There's going to be no salesperson. Sales is a verb. It's going to be sales will probably just be replaced with buy or test or something else to that effect. And I know that's controversial and people are like, well, that guy's crazy. No one's ever going to buy, a piece of $1 million piece of software or $1 million machine. From GE. Yeah, let's ask GE. $1 million machine from GE. You know what GE is investing in? GE is investing in technology so your machine will tell you when it needs to be replaced. Exactly. How you like them apples? Right. How you like them apples? I mean, that's what GE is or actually, wait, a company that rhymes with
That's what a lot of companies are working on. That's what the company that I work for, we create pieces to connect. It's IoT. It connects everything to everything else to say, there's an oil rig in the middle of the ocean that you now don't have to send a human being out to check anymore because we're going to have a 10-year module that's sending data out through wireless services that doesn't even require internet. Like
exactly.
It's insane.
That's such an interesting point, Derek, because I think you hear people always, I'm guilty of it too. Where I've said, okay, well, like everything except giant rockets and like complex, like heavy machinery will be sold without salespeople, but that stuff will still be sold with salespeople. But you're right that the combination of AI with IoT and the fact that GE's literally building that themselves, the ones that build those giant heavy machines and the engines and whatnot, they are literally trying to figure out that way to eliminate
the sales process,
Exactly.
because they don't want to. Nobody wants to be competitive. Nobody wants to have to compete, and this is the issue. So if you build a machine, a big, huge, whatever GE machine, and you build it, and then you figure, oh, I need to replace this machine. You go out and you bring in the people, the RFP. It's the process that we've created. So GE says, I don't even want to worry about hiring a GE salesperson. Let me take my machine, let me create it in a way where it tells the people when it needs to be replaced, when it tells the people it needs to be fixed. You've seen the commercial where the little girl goes and she, eventually builds the machine, and she changes the code that says, oh, it's going to tell you when these parts need to be oiled. It's going to tell you when this needs to be maintained, and everything else like that. And people think, oh, that's taken care of, the customer and everything else. It's replacing sales. It's replacing this whole sales process. So if you want to, oh, there you go.
I just lost Lizzie, but it's all right. No worries.
So if you want to invest in your career as a salesperson, so let's say you're a salesperson in 2018, and you're like, dude, I kind of don't believe what you're saying, but I'm kind of scared that it's kind of true. So it's kind of like, I'm whistling past the graveyard. It's like late at night, and I'm like, ooh, could he be really saying what's true? So what you need to do is you need to invest in your own brand, but you also need to infuse yourself in what happens after the sale. And by that, I mean customer experience. Right. Because quite honestly, in the market that we have right now, because the barrier of entry is so low with anything as a service, because everything is going as a service. Everything will eventually be a service. You will buy everything as a subscription. The lion's share of revenue from that particular customer happens after the initial sale. And the people that drive that will be historically the people that we've outsourced, the people, customer experience, customer success, the help desk, those type of people. Companies within the next 5 to 10 years are going to be increasing spending and increasing the professional, the professional outlook and what's going on in customer experience, because I think they're going to realize that's where the lion's share of the revenue is. The reason people invest in sales, and this, is because they've always thought that revenue starts at the front end. Nothing happens without somebody selling something. Well, in the X as a service model, nothing happens without a renewal.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, that's like the number one, at least, at HubSpot, for example, it's one number we obsess about is what is our churn? And the unicorn is how do you get to negative churn where people buy more from you over time? That's why Salesforce ends up being, so successful in the cloud space. And, not that I love Salesforce trying to promote them necessarily, but like that is something that they do well with, right? And that's the truth. So.
No, I know.
Anyway.
It really is. So the future of sales is customer experience, and you need to get good at that. And you can.
There's one bit actually on that exact point. We had a guy that was basically founded the partner channel at HubSpot, the agency partner channel. He's now the CEO of a company called Databox, and ironically, it's in the same building that HubSpot's in Cambridge. And he said, you may have seen this. He said, in the future, product teams are the new marketers. Yeah. Marketers are the new salespeople, and salespeople are the new customer success team. Yeah. Yeah. And I think he's right. I mean, I think that really ties back into what you're ultimately saying here, Derek, is that, look, it's not about that upfront sale. It's not about bringing in like, oh, I closed a $100,000 or $1 million upfront sale. Salesforce talks about this stuff, or businesses talk about this stuff, but the real money, if you want to look at it, is in that incremental compounding of subscription revenue over time and retention. That's where the money comes from.
So I'll cap off with this. So recently, last couple of days, you guys can probably search it on LinkedIn. I saw a post from a recruiter who said that there's 1,000+ SDR positions open in San Francisco proper right now. Right now. Wow. 1,000 positions. Now, when I look at that and I hear that, I'm an old guy, I got gray in my beard. I think you got a growth problem. I think you got a retention problem. I think you're if you're hiring people on the front end at that level, you've taken on so much funding and you're supposed to be growing so quickly, but you're churning customers, you're not retaining them, and you're not bringing them on fast enough. The issue is you think by, as you said, adding more people in the front is going to go ahead and drive that capability. And I think if every one of those companies, not to say I don't want people hired, but if every one of those companies that's pushing to increase their SDRs or their AMs 10%, 20%, 30%, 40% over the next year. If they would invest half of that money on retention, half of that money on referral, you go to these companies, nobody has a referral process. They leave it up to the salesperson. They don't have a structure. The most important thing you can do when you're going to a restaurant that I've been, what do you ask me? You ask me, how's the food?
Right.
What's the service like? It's the way, again, we go back to the way we buy.
Well, it's even the example of B2C. So, I mean, look at open any app that you have on your phone right now. I don't care if it's an Android or iPhone. I guarantee you, any app you open is going to have a little gift thing in the top corner, whether in the settings or in the actual main page or whatever. And that's going to have a little referral link to say, hey, invite 5 friends and get X amount free. Why in B2B, so few companies have something like that?
Not only that, but here's the topper. So you and I know each other. We're sitting in the same office. We're at different cubicles, whatever. Brian calls me. It's lunchtime. Brian calls me and says, hey, there's this new Thai place that just opened up a couple months ago. I've tried it. It's really great. Let's go. Oh, what's the name? Taiwan on. Oh, okay. So I go on Yelp. Actually, that's a great name for a restaurant. So it's like, hey, it's like, so I look up on Yelp, Taiwan on, 1.5 stars. Ooh, it doesn't look good. Blah blah blah. Now, I've known Brian for a couple years. We've worked together. We went out for drinks to Dave and Buster's. We've done all this other stuff, right? What do I do? And if we're honest with ourselves, what do we do? Do I trust Brian and say, let's go to Taiwan on, or do I call him back and email him and say, hey, not really feeling the Thai food today. Why don't we just go get burgers or something else?
Now,
be honest with yourself, Brian.
I definitely.
Which one would you do?
If I genuinely think that if someone, so that exact example you gave, I'd probably say, hey, I'm not so sure.
I thought people buy from people.
Right.
Where's we have a relationship. Brian, you've been to my wedding. Brian, you were at my wedding. You're not going to go to the restaurant with me?
I'd say the same thing. I just say, hey, look, I love you, but there's 50 reviews that say not so great. And maybe, I don't know. Have you actually been?
Sales isn't about persuasion anymore. It's about proof.
Right.
And if you want to, if that's just one statement, if they put that on my tombstone, although I'm going to be frozen, so that's another conversation. So it's just put that there. Sales is about proof, not persuasion. And because there is no greater proof than the proof of the crowd.
I love that.
Proof of the market.
I think that's
The consumer is the engine of the world economy. It's not the worker. It's not even the investor. It's not even the shareholders. The consumer will dictate it.
I love that. I think it's a great thought and tight one to end on. That sales. What did I write down here? Sales. Sales. Sales is not about persuasion. It is about proof in the modern age. So Derek, thanks a lot for being on with us today. Lindsay had to hop, what I'm assuming is to another meeting for a bit. But it was great to have you. If people want to connect with you, whether it's through LinkedIn, Twitter, something else, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
You can go to my website is really easy. Everything's there. realsalesadvice.com. One word, realsalesadvice.com. I'm also on Twitter as Real Sales Advice, and you can find me on LinkedIn by searching my name, but spelling it, you probably need an MBA from Harvard. So realsalesadvice.com.
Beautiful. All right. So realsalesadvice.com. Don't miss it. Derek Wyszynski on with us. Had a great time with you today, Derek, as always. Really appreciate you coming on. And until next time, keep talking.
You've been listening to the Yin and Yang Show, a marketing and sales conversation with Lindsay Kelly and Brian Signorelli. Join us online at yinandyang.fm.